Back, China is now responding to the president's tariff announcement. Let's get to Eunice Yoon in Beijing. Hi, Eunice.
Hey, the effective tariff rate, as you guys were talking about with China, is actually around 70%. So this is how it all stacks up. After President Trump had taken office, he hit China with 2 rounds of 10% tariffs. That was to pressure China on fentanyl. Now we have this 34%, and it reflects the universal baseline of 10%. Plus 24%, which is specific to China. So that 10% goes into effect on April 5th, and then the higher one on April 9th. So these tariffs come on top of the tariffs that President Trump had put in place during his first term. So those range from 10 to 25%. And then separately to that, President Trump had announced that he was going to close a trade loophole that has benefited Chinese e-retailers such as Shein and Temu. So they have been able to send a lot of goods duty-free that way. China today announced that it is going to take resolute countermeasures. Those are their words. And based on what we've seen with the previous 2 rounds, the expectation is that not only are they going to hit back with counter tariffs, but also with an expanded retaliation toolbox. So this includes potential export controls for more critical minerals, as well as punishing individual American companies. Macquarie expects that Beijing is going to go that route when it comes to pushing a broader effort, which is to support Chinese suppliers to push the cost of the tariffs onto their U.S. customers. If you guys remember, Walmart executives were summoned by Beijing and chastised for putting more pressure onto Chinese suppliers. And then one of the other big talking points here is whether or not Beijing is going to make a larger than expected devaluation of the renminbi in order to try to help some of these Chinese exporters. But at the end of the day, still very unclear if China will be able to do enough to really offset a 70% tariff. And so there have been several economists here, as well as overseas, saying that the economy is likely going to see a hit to growth anywhere between 1% to 2%. A city said 2.4% this year. Guys?
Okay, so Eunice, to go back to this notion of Walmart, is there anyone who actually would have so many people who work in China that they actually have some pricing power? And I mention this because Apple's done so much in this country to be able to make it so that they're going to have new jobs. But I would love to hear that you might say, listen, Apple is maybe in the most favored nation status because they've done so much to advance the middle class in China. Is it ever like that, or are they just the one that gets hurt the most? Oh,
I'm really sorry, Jim. Your audio was cutting in and out. Do you mind asking that question again? I'm sorry.
The party must love that question.
Yeah, they like that question.
I was asking about, is there anyone who's a most favored nation status? For instance, Apple's done a great deal to raise the middle class in China. They do buy Apple for China. Is there any way that maybe they just say, you know what, we're going to actually come to the table and say some of your great companies we're not going to hammer? Anything like that could happen?
Jim, what I heard was, I think you asking if there was any effort that China would actually come to the table. And I think that at this point, it depends on what that would actually look like. I think that from the Chinese perspective, there's definitely a desire to continue to work with the U.S. The U.S. is a huge market for a lot of companies. This is going to have a big impact on the Chinese economy. So it's within the Chinese government's interest to come to the table. But exactly how that looks is still unknown, because we've heard, we've talked a lot about how President Xi and President Trump, maybe there'd be some conversation. But one thing that's really important to note is that President Xi is not going to want to look as though he's been pressured and bullied by President Trump or by the Americans or the West to do something that he doesn't want to do. So that's going to be a really big factor in exactly how China does come to the table.
Wow. Yeah, we're gonna keep our eyes certainly on any potential FX adjustment, Eunice. Thank you for that, Eunice Yoon in Beijing.